Next, our speaker is Katerina. I'm always very excited when I meet a woman in tech. There are not so many of us, but Katerina is an amazing human being with a big heart. And she's mentoring women, so we're more of us. And she likes climbing mountains and obviously cats. So let's give her a big applause and listen to her talk.
So, hi everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I personally am very excited to be here. It's my first in-person talk in 2 years. 2 years and 10 days or something. So yeah, I'm very excited. Bear with me if I get a bit anxious or worried, because it's been 2 years, as I said. I don't know if I said it's been 2 years, so... Okay, I'll get started without further ado. Today, I'll be talking to you about Storybook and Angular with an X. A few words about me. My name is Katerina. I am a core member of the NX team. I'm a Google Developer Expert for Angular, Google Maps, and Web Technologies. I'm also the AngularAthens meetup co-founder. I'm a speaker and instructor. I love cats. I mentor women in technology. And you can follow me on Twitter at psyber.city or go to my website, psyber.city. So today, this is going to be the agenda. I like things being symmetrical, so I left one blank point. So we're going to talk about Storybook, NX, and then why would someone want to use NX with Storybook for their application. And then we're going to do some demos and some conclusions. So first of all, let's see what Storybook is. So what is Storybook? First, this is a picture of my cats smelling a package that Storybook sent me because I am a very nice contributor. So what is Storybook? Who here was yesterday at our workshop? Okay, so those few of you who were at the workshop learned what Storybook is. For the rest of you, Storybook, the definition of Storybook is that it's an open source tool for developing UI components in isolation. Thank you very much. What does that mean? The core ideas is that you have the story. So you create a story for a component. And what is a story? We're going to see. Then you draft out a scenario. So you use your components in the story, describing use case scenarios, various states of that component. And then you can share the results, a collection of stories, which is a storybook, like a book. It serves like a catalog, for example, of the available elements and states of elements, sorry. Let's see, actually, we'll see the example after I finish talking about Storybook. The cool things about Storybook is you can develop entire UIs without needing to start up a complex dev stack. So what does that mean? I gave that example yesterday as well. Imagine that you want to test a very specific field or toggle at the third page of a very complicated sign-up form. So what you would normally have to do would be to fire up your application, fire up your server, fire up any authentication services you may be using, start doing your sign-up, write in all your details, then clicking next, then write in more details, then clicking next, going to the third page, but you have not really set up any caching or anything, and you want to test what a toggle does. You work with the toggle, and then you update some styles, and when you update the styles, the page refreshes, and everything is gone. And in order to test that toggle again for these specific styles, you have to go through the whole form again. So this is very tedious, of course, and whoever has worked with something like this knows that it's very, very tiring. What Storybook does is that you can take that component, that toggle component, for example, outside, put it inside Storybook, and Storybook will set up a wrapping environment around it where it can only render that component, and you can add different inputs and states of it, and you can really test it as it is in isolation without needing to start in your whole application. So it sort of bootstraps a very light environment in which you can import your components and play around with it. And we'll really see how it works. Also, the cool thing about that is that I think you can imagine that you will be doing this for a toggle, you will be doing this for your buttons, you will be doing this for most of your elements in your application, and in the end, you will end up with sort of a documentation for your UI library or your UI system. Then you can, of course, easily browse and trigger different states, and we'll see this in the examples that Storybook offers on their website. So you can, so the way Storybook works is, as you will see, is that in an Angular component, you have your inputs, and with Storybook, you can draft out stories changing the inputs. Also, it integrates with most front-end frameworks, with React, with Angular, with Vue, and Svelte, and I think with more, if there are more. Also, it integrates very well with Cypress for your E2e test, and I'm sure a lot of you who didn't know in advance what Storybook is, as I was speaking about it, you may have thought of E2e tests, right? Trying to trigger different states, see the results, test if it's right. Storybook can be used for your E2e tests. So it integrates so well with Cypress so that you only have to create a story, then import it in your Cypress and just test using this. So you can write less tests, you can use your stories, like to kill two birds with one stone. Both use it as documentation or whatever else you use it for, and use it for your E2e tests. Or write less tests, rely on your stories. So how does it work? First, let me show you an example. OK, yes, I'm mirroring. So if you go to, if you go to Storybook's website and go to the examples, there is a large list of organizations and websites that already use Storybook to document their design system or their components, and they have this public because, as I said in the beginning, you can share and you can publish the storybooks you build. So I'm sure that most of you will be familiar with the BBC website. So the BBC website uses Storybook, and the cool thing, And the cool thing about it is that this is what a storybook would look like for any website. On the left side, you will have a list of all the available UI components that that website uses. And if you click on one, for example, the brand, you will be able to see how it looks in isolation. Like this is just the header rendered here. And I think I would be able to change, for example, the color to see how the header will look in another color. And you could just do this with these buttons and these inputs. And it's very, very easy, as you see, to test different states and different styles. So I could change the height or whatever. And if you start browsing, you will see that it's what it is. It's a catalog, and your design team could use it to make sure that the mockups match with what the developers are building, or a new developer may use it to see what they have available in order to build new interfaces, right? So let me go back to the presentation. So how does it work? You just add a story file right next to your component file. You import your components and draft out scenarios. So as I said, you just add a story file. So if you, never mind. On the right side, you see your typical Angular component layout. You have your My Button folder, and inside you have your .css file, your .html file, your .spec.ts file, your .ts file, which is the main component, and your .stories.ts file. And let's see how that would look. Wait. So if you're building a custom component, for example, a custom button, for example, and you just have some inputs, the label, whether it's disabled or not, and the background color as inputs, and your template would look like this. Something very familiar to all Angular developers, your story setup and one story for your custom component would look like this. First, you have, of course, some inputs from the Storybook Angular package. Then you would export your component, and then you would start building your story. You would have a template for your story, and the template would be a story of type of my component. And in there, you would just import the arguments. The arguments are the inputs, right? And the arguments get passed in the props, which are actually the inputs that have the ability to be changed in the story finally. So in your template story, you just have your component and have your props. And then using the template, you can just pass different arguments to it. And here, the primary is the first story that we draft with it. And in our first story, we pass some custom values. We pass the label as click me, the disabled as false, and the background color as green. Yeah. No, red, green, blue. Never mind. Something like magenta, I would say. In any case, you can, of course, add a secondary and a tertiary and a Katerina story after that and change the inputs just to have, in the end, a catalog of all the different states. And we're going to see this. So this would look like this. So if this would be my story, the result, if I served Storybook, would be like this. You remember how we saw the BBC, that in the left you have the catalog of the components, and on the right you have a button that is of color magenta, and on the bottom you have the editable props, which are the editable inputs that you can change. So if I change the inputs and I put the color yellow and I set disable true and I change the text, it would just change live for me. And I could also click it and it would just work like my custom component would if I had it in my Angular application normally. Also, please take, I'm not sure if it's visible. Actually, I'm 100% sure it's not visible to you. You can pass arguments, so the props, you can pass the values of the props in the URL. And how is this useful? This is super useful for your E2e tests because, for example, when you're drafting out scenarios with Cypress, you tell Cypress to go to that URL with these values, and this URL will render this component, and then you can tell Cypress to make sure that when I pass the value of background color yellow, make sure the button color is yellow. Or when I pass the text hello there, then it goes and looks into the code and makes sure that it's hello there. So yes, this is how it helps with E2e tests. Finally, you can build and publish your storybook, as we said, and we'll see how NX makes that even easier. What is NX? I hope, Jeff, I give a very good explanation of NX. First of all, I have what we say in the website. NX is a suite of powerful, extensible dev tools to help you architect, test, and build at any scale. It integrates seamlessly with modern technologies and libraries while providing a robust CLI, caching, dependency management, and more. Meaning? First of all, we offer generators. I'm sure since this is an Angular conference, most of you, if not all, are familiar with the Angular CLI, so you are familiar with the concept of code generators. We offer generators that architect your workspace and they generate code. We offer executors to build, test, lint, and in general automate tasks. We offer migrators that help you upgrade easily using generators and executors. So if you want to go from one version to the other, NX makes the experience almost seamless. You would just do NX migrate to the latest version, and it would take care of updating your code and running some scripts to make sure that everything is good for the next version. Then we offer a number of plugins which we support, which offer integration with modern tools. We support Cypress, CSLint, Prettier, and of course Storybook, which we're seeing today. Also, some cool features about NX, which I'm not going to get into because it's a whole different subject. and I'm sure Jeff will talk about it in his talk, which you should see, and if you're interested in computation, cast, and code-based analysis, see Jeff's talk. Never build or test the same code twice. This is our motto. We also offer distributed CI, incremental builds, integration with your CI, and xCloud, and much, much more, which you will see at Jeff's talk. Okay, all this is fine. Why should I combine the two tools? Why should I use NX in combination with Storybook for my application? So NX features that facilitate Storybook development are the following. NX will create stories for you. So if you've used Storybook without NX, you will have noticed that you can use the Storybook CLI, which when you run, for example, I think SB init, it will just generate some sample files for you, which do not take into account what you already have, right? What NX will do is it will read your Angular component, and it will understand the code, it will find the inputs, it will take the inputs, and it will put them into your story as arguments. So if you wanted to start Storybook development today with NX, you wouldn't need to read one line of documentation for Storybook, because NX would just generate everything for you, and then you would just run the command to serve Storybook, and everything would be ready for you, and you wouldn't have to do anything. Of course, if you wanted to go deeper, you would have to read some documentation, but NX will help you get started instantly. And for example, a lot of our clients or a lot of people that I know already use NX with Storybook, and they don't write any single line of code. They just use the auto-generated stories that come with NX because they take into account their props, and they don't need to do anything else. So even the minimal configuration that NX offers would be good enough for your application or your organization. Also, another cool thing is that NX will manage Storybook through the NX ecosystem. So this means that you will not have to learn yet one more CLI or yet more commands. Everything is, if you start using NX and you are a bit familiar with NX console or the NX CLI, everything is integrated with Storybook in there, so it's just one single command for everything. Also, because of that, because Storybook gets integrated into NX, we cache the results. We use the cache to fetch results. So everything is just seamless and in this ecosystem. We also generate E2e tests for your stories. Like I explained, we use Cypress and we use Storybook. And when we generate E2e tests for you, we take advantage of the feature that you can just add prop values on your URL and use it with your E2e tests. So NX also, as I said, and I stressed a lot, provides an integrated environment for your commands. It provides seamless instant integration with your CI. Also, you get advantage of the power of computation, casting, and code-based analysis for your builds and tests. And also, we offer active maintenance and support. We work very closely with the Storybook core team. Just last week, we received like a GitHub issue about Storybook. We weren't sure if it was our fault or it was Storybook's fault. I just instant messaged the Michael, who is the main maintainer of Storybook, on Discord. He said, let me look at it. He took a look. He replied on GitHub. It was our thing. We fixed it. So it all goes back and forth instantly with the Storybook team. So everything that comes up in us or in them, we just collaborate and solve it instantly. Also, I have to say that Storybook also uses NX to manage their workspace. So they trust us and we trust them. So how do you use Storybook? You just add the Nrwl Storybook package to your NX workspace, and you configure Storybook for an application or a library. Who is not familiar with NX at all? So everybody here is familiar with NX, or you're not paying attention. Okay, I will assume you're not paying attention, or I will assume that everyone is familiar with NX because we're doing such a great job with NX. So since you're so familiar with NX, and you have used it before, All you have to do is add the Nrwl storybook package, and then you would just use nx_generate at Nrwl Angular because you want to give it the framework that you will be using, storybook configuration for your project. And what this will do is it will install the required dependencies. So it will install the Storybook Angular package, it will install the Storybook Core package, and some add-ons that we need. It will also set up the necessary scripts to run and build Storybook. So since you're familiar with NX, it will go into your project JSON and it will add some new targets to run and build Storybook. It will also add the default Storybook configuration, which are some files that Storybook needs in order to know how to get bootstrapped. And it will generate stories for your components, which I think is one of our coolest features when supporting Storybook. So I'll go through the generators, and then maybe I'll show the live demo. So some of our generators, as I said, is the Storybook configuration generator, which will generate stories for you. But what happens if in one project you create some new components? We have the stories generator, which will generate stories for those components in the project that don't have stories, and it will also update stories for components that have changed. Also, we have some migrators. As I said, migrators are scripts that we have that will update your code, and they will edit your code to match newer versions, and they will also update packages in your package JSON. When you want to migrate Storybook from 5 to 6, you would just run a migrator. The Storybook migrate defaults 5 to 6. If you don't like that name, I came up with it. So if you have existing Storybook configurations in Storybook version 5, it will migrate your configurations to Storybook version 6. There are a lot of breaking changes from version 5 to version 6 in Storybook. So, and I'm sure that if anyone is still using Storybook version 5, they would have had the tedious task of updating all their configurations manually. NX will just generate new configurations for you, and if anyone had some niche configurations that were very specific to their organization, they would just have to do it manually in the end. But NX would just do the very tedious job of going into each configuration and migrating it. Also, this is another generator title I came up with. Storybook migrates stories to 6.2. When Storybook Angular changed from version 6 to 6.2, again, there was a breaking change in the way Angular stories were written for Storybook. So this generator will just go and migrate your stories and make the necessary changes to your file so that it works with 6.2, because it's very important to keep up with the latest versions. And Storybook is an ever-evolving tool, and each version has more cool features. So I would always suggest that you keep up with the latest stable version. And when everything is said and done, you can just do NX Storybook, my project name, and you would get Storybook running locally. No, we're not wrapping up yet. I will briefly show you a short demo, but let me drink some water first. So I will use the thing we built yesterday in our workshop. So here is an NX workspace. Let me make things bigger. And since you're familiar with NX, I will not explain it. I will be saying this until the end of the presentation because you were not paying attention when I asked that question. So, so this is an NX workspace. It's a monorepo. It has some applications. It has some libraries. And we have set up Storybook for it. In order to set up Storybook for it, you have some configurations files like the main.js and the tsconfig. And then in each of your applications and libraries that you want to have Storybook, you will have another folder which will import the main configurations, and we'll just import the stories. And as I showed, if you have your button, that looks like this, your component story looks like this, and here I have added two stories, the primary story and the secondary story. And I could really name this however I wanted. It's just customary to name the first primary and the second secondary and the third tertiary, but yeah. So here you can see that I have put some different values. In the primary, I have made it red. The other one I have made it gray because I want it to be disabled, for example. So we'll see this live. But what I have also done is I have generated a new application, a new library using an X, and I just have a component that has only an input, a text input, and it doesn't have some stories. So first of all, let's generate a storybook configuration for it, and then we will serve everything so that you can see how it looks. So with the NX console, I could go and generate storybook configuration for my project NGBE, and I would ask to configure Cypress and also to generate Cypress specs, so it would generate E2e tests and generate some stories. So if I clicked run here, it would run everything in my console. And if I went back here, you see that in my changes, I have a new story, just like this, very easily, with just clicking a couple of buttons, that imports my component. And as an argument, it takes the title that I have put, the hello NGB. So now let's serve this to see how it looks. Wait. Or I will not use this to serve it. Wait. So I would just do NX Storybook, NGBE, NGBE. And it would run the local storybook server, and let's see what it would look like. And then I'll show you the button as well because it's cooler. Okay, so as you see, it said Storybook 6.4.4 for Angular started on my local host. So if I open this on my local host, I have just imported my component, and I can change this here and do like this. But let's serve the button component, which looks a bit cooler. Which library was it in? I think it was in the shared UI other. So if I would just do NX Storybook shared UI other, store UI other. Yes. Let's see what it would look like. So Storybook for Angular started, and this is what I would see. It's the button that I have here with the colors. I can change these toggles, I can change this text, but I would already have a secondary story that would already have the values I wanted, so I wouldn't even have to touch the controls. If I wanted to share this with someone, for example, maybe I would just go ahead and disable the controls and just have pre-filled all the different states I wanted them to see on my own. So I would have the button, and you can see it's clickable. I mean, it's like it's a ready-made component. It's not like a screenshot or something. So it's interactable, and is this a word? I don't know. So yeah, again, you can change this. So yeah, this is what your storybook would look like, and this is how easy it would be with an X to set it up and serve it. So let's go back to the presentation. I'll start panicking like Michael Hladky did before. So let's wrap up. These again are my cats, one trying to wrap up the other cat, so it was sort of a joke. Yeah. Yeah. So to wrap up, Storybook helps you publish your design system or your component catalog, if you will. Storybook helps you quickly test out various states and scenarios in isolation. And I explained what in isolation means. NX helps you use Storybook by integrating it with its tool system. It adds it in its CLI and then in everything that it has, like the caching and the code analysis and whatever else NX has. NX helps you use Storybook by generating stories for you, migrating your code, and much, much more. Also, NX helps you scale up with these executors and generators. NX helps you integrate Storybook into your pipelines, for example, for testing. So it would be very common, instead of just adding your E2e test and your unit test, to just add some testing with Storybook in your pipelines to make sure that everything looks and works as it should. The NX team is in sync with the Storybook team to address issues in time and plan forward for new features. And here is a list you may need. You can go to nx.dev for NX, to nx.app for NX Cloud. You can find us on GitHub, and you can also find Storybook on GitHub. And please start using NX and Storybook, and whatever questions or issues you have, you can go on our GitHub issues and paste them there. So thank you. That was it.